Chapter 868. The other 5 royal elders also knelt down and said in unison, "Third princess, please hold the scepter." Shengguan looked at the Tianling scepter floating above the black crystal, took a deep breath, and walked forward slowly. Finally, she stood a step away from the heavens-writ scepter. Everyone fell silent as they watched the scene unfold before them. As long as Shengguan successfully held the Tianling scepter, she would be able to ascend the throne. From then on, she would wield the power of the Tianling dynasty. Thump thump, thump thump. Shengguan's heart was beating violently. It was almost shattering her eardrums. All the blood in her body seemed to be boiling, rushing through her limbs and bones. Because she was nervous, her palms were sweaty, and both her hands were wet and sticky. The Tianling scepter was extremely heavy, and the aura it contained was extremely powerful. After all, it was left behind by Taizu himself. Not to mention lifting it, just standing there made Shengguan feel a tightness in her chest, and she almost knelt on the ground. To lift it, strength alone wasn't enough. At the same time, one had to have the bloodline of the Tianling royal family. Most importantly, one had to gain the Tianling scepter's approval. To any successor of the Tianling dynasty, this was a threshold that had to be crossed. If they succeeded, they would become a supreme existence above millions of people. If they failed, they would become the laughingstock of the world, and they would never be able to make a comeback. Shengguan kept persuading herself in her heart. "I can do it, I definitely can." She had made thorough preparations for today, and there was no way she would fail. It was already noon, and the sky was clear and cloudless. The scorching sun shone down. And at this moment, Shengguan became the focus of countless people's attention. Finally, she slowly reached out and reached for the Tianling scepter. When it was still half an arm away from the Heaven's Order scepter, a buzzing sound suddenly spread out from it. The Tianling scepter, which was covered in a layer of faint light, suddenly released a powerful aura. Shengguan was the first to bear the brunt of it, and she immediately took a step back from the impact. She was shocked and quickly stabilized her body. Her feet were nailed to the ground. Fortunately, she reacted in time, and the impact this time did not affect her too much. But in the end, under everyone's watchful eyes, he still took a step back. For a time, the huge square became even quieter. One had to know that at this moment, Shengguan's performance was seen by countless people. Elder Jianghu, who was singing the ceremony, also frowned slightly. He was the most senior of the royal family elders, a true veteran of 3 dynasties. He had seen such an occasion 3 times, and this was already the 4th time. In his impression, the first 3 enthronement ceremonies had gone very smoothly. As the symbol of imperial power, the Tianling scepter was a sacred item that the entire dynasty worshipped. It also had spirituality. In the past, during the process of holding the scepter, the Tianling scepter would naturally emit a powerful aura, but it would only do so when the successor tried to pick it up from the black crystal. However, just now, Shengguan's hand had not even touched the Tianling scepter, and it had already caused such a commotion. Elder Jianghu felt uneasy and felt that something was amiss. Shengguan thought to herself that it was a close call. She almost fell down just now. However, the Tianling scepter seemed to be more difficult to control than expected. Just getting close to it was already so difficult. Who knew how difficult it would be to try to lift it? She pursed her lips and channeled the force in her body to her right hand. Immediately after, she took another step forward. This time, she was even more cautious than before. She used her force to wrap her hand completely and reached for the Tianling scepter. Buzz. The Tianling scepter trembled slightly. The commotion was even greater. Fortunately, Shengguan had suffered a loss previously. This time, she clenched her teeth and decided to endure it. The closer she got, the stronger the aura became. Her entire right hand felt like it was about to be crushed. Shengguan's face was pale, and her hand was trembling slightly. However, she still resolutely moved forward. Today, no matter what, she had to succeed. Elder Jianghu watched from the side, and the feeling that something was wrong grew stronger. Strange. Why did the Tianling scepter seem to be very resistant to Shangguan? He had never seen such a situation before. He frowned anxiously. It wouldn't be good if this went on. It would be extremely difficult for Shangguan to pick it up. The other elders from the royal family who were standing nearby also sensed something. They looked at each other in unison and secretly exchanged glances. Logically speaking, Shangguan had royal blood running through her veins. Her talent and strength were also not bad. She should be able to succeed smoothly. However, judging from the current situation, it seemed that Jianghu stood behind Shangguan, only 10 steps away from her. Although he couldn't see Shangguan's expression from here, he could already tell many things from her reaction. His heart was also in his mouth. Everyone at the bottom of the stairs watched this scene nervously. Chu Luiwe looked up slightly. From here, he could see half of Shangguan's face. Her expression wasn't very good. It seemed that lifting the Tianling scepter wasn't that easy for her. Finally, after a long and painful torture, Shangguan's hand finally reached into the layer of light and grabbed the Tianling scepter. In an instant, a bone-chilling aura surged out from within. Shangguan clearly saw that her entire right hand was instantly covered in frost. Moreover, that layer of ice seemed to be spreading outwards. She was shocked and hurriedly circulated her force to block that icy aura outside. However, her right hand was already red and swollen from the cold. She couldn't feel anything at all. The Heavenly Order scepter was forged by the great ancestor using the 1,000-year-old ice bone wood from the extreme cold of the northern border. This kind of 1,000-year ice bone wood wasn't a real tree. It was formed by condensing the force of heaven and earth and freezing into a tree-like stalactite. It was rumored that it would only grow an inch every 100 years. One could only imagine how terrifying the energy it contained was. Shangguan only felt that the chill seemed to have silently spread from her palm to her entire body. For a moment, she almost thought that she was going to become an ice sculpture. She knew that she had to pick it up as soon as possible. Otherwise, if this torture continued, she was afraid that her entire body would be crippled. Thinking of this, Shangguan gritted her teeth and circulated all the force in her body. She gripped the Tianling scepter tightly and exerted force. "Rise!" Shangguan shouted clearly. However, she was shocked to find that the Tianling scepter didn't move at all. It was still quietly floating above the black crystal. No matter how she controlled the abundant origin power to attack it, it didn't move at all. In front of Lang Kuan Palace, everyone who was nervously watching this scene was stunned. Someone quietly said, "Did this fail? Is this a failure?" A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 869. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. This whisper was especially clear. Instantly, it was like a drop of water falling into a pot of oil. The crowd started to stir, and many people looked at each other. This did seem to be a little strange. Looking at Shangguan's appearance, she should have used all her strength. But the Tianling scepter did not move at all. It can't be. Isn't the third princess a 7th-level fighter? Logically speaking, she should be able to do it. But the Tianling scepter did not move. If the third princess really can't do it today, it will be too embarrassing. The low voices of discussion reached Shangguan's ears, and every word made her feel even more embarrassed and tormented. She clenched her teeth and tried again. But the Tianling scepter still showed no signs of moving. The noise below gradually grew louder. The few elders of the imperial family beside him also gradually had a trace of suspicion on their faces. Shangguan's heart beat violently, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. In a short time, her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The Tianling scepter in her hand was bone-chillingly cold, but it was not as cold as her heart now. It was as if a basin of ice water was poured over her head. She couldn't help but shudder. She started to tremble. Why was the Tianling scepter not moving? She had risked her life to restore her Yuan meridian. Although it was not the best, it was still at the level of the earth scripture. In addition, she had painstakingly accumulated this strength. How could she not be able to lift the Tianling scepter? Shang Guanwan became more and more anxious. But the more anxious she was, the more flustered she became. She wanted to gather all the strength in her body and try again, but for some reason her limbs went soft, and she could not exert any strength. But she did not dare to let go. That would be admitting that she could not do it. So, Shang Guanwan held the Tianling scepter and did not move. Actually, she had been trying to move, but to no avail. So in the eyes of the surrounding people, it looked like she was standing there stiffly. Time seemed to pass very slowly at this moment. The few elders from the imperial family looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. The gentle smile on Jianghu face could no longer be maintained. If Shang Guanwan was unable to pick up the scepter today, she would not be able to ascend the throne. More importantly, she would never have the chance to try a second time. In that case, he would also be greatly implicated. At that time, all the previous efforts would be in vain. He no longer had the chance to find a third royal princess to marry. Don't be nervous. Take it slow. Jiang Yuqing finally couldn't help but open his mouth. At first glance, his expression seemed quite calm, but if one looked closely, they would see the anxiety and worry in his eyes. Shang Guanwan looked back at him. She knew very well that Jiang Yuqing wasn't encouraging her, but warning her. If she fails. At the thought of the terrifying consequences, Shang Guanwan pursed her lips and looked at the Tianling scepter in front of her again. With his current strength, he was afraid that it would be impossible. Then, Senior, could you please help me? Shang Guanwan asked in her heart. After a moment, that cold and indifferent voice sounded. Just as I thought, although your Yuan meridian has recovered, it's still lacking something. After all, your Yuan meridian's grade was not very good to begin with, and after it was destroyed by the flames of the Tianjing Yuan meridian, it was even worse. It was already very difficult for you to recover to your current state. The voice was very calm when he said these words, as if he was narrating a very ordinary matter. But in Shang Guanwan's ears, it didn't sound like that at all. She felt that he was mocking her. A deep resentment grew in her heart. If not for Shang Guanyu, she wouldn't be in such a difficult position now. Your Highness, do you still want to continue? Seeing that Shang Guanwan didn't move, Elder Chen finally couldn't help but ask carefully. The moment he said that, everyone quieted down again and looked at Shang Guanwan with different expressions. If she continued, she might not succeed, and she might even be mocked for being incompetent. But if she gave up just like that, it would mean that Shang Guanwan had completely failed. Not to mention ascending the throne, even if she lived as the third princess, her life might not be any better. Those who had failed before didn't have good endings. Shang Guanwan immediately said, "Of course." Seeing how resolute she was, Elder Chen wanted to say something but stopped. Actually, according to his past experience, Shang Guanwan was destined to fail. But since she wanted to continue, he couldn't say anything. "Third princess, please?" Elder Chen's expression became much more serious. If Shang Guanwan still couldn't do it this time, then they really had to consider many things in the future. Shang Guanwan nodded slightly and frowned slightly. "Senior." Suddenly, a chuckle sounded beside her ear. Then, Shang Guanwan felt a flash in front of her eyes. A vigorous aura suddenly erupted from her body. In an instant, like a river bursting its banks, an endless amount of force surged. A black rune appeared between Shang Guanwan's eyebrows and disappeared in an instant. Due to the special position she was standing in and the fact that the rune flashed too quickly, no one noticed it. Then, a storm seemed to be brewing in the depths of her eyes. Cold. Sinister. It was as if she had become a completely different person. Then she clenched her fists and tried to raise the Tianling scepter again. Buzz! A roar sounded. It shone brightly. In the next moment, the Tianling scepter finally moved. Shang Guanwan's mouth twitched. It seemed to be small, but there was a hint of stiffness in it. The black crystal was instantly filled with colorful lights. And the Tianling scepter started to move slowly along with Shang Guanwan's movements. It moved. The Tianling scepter moved. Someone exclaimed in surprise. The crowd became noisy again. Almost everyone rushed to look, afraid that they would miss something. Seeing Shangguan slowly pick up the Tianling scepter, the stone in Elder Chenku's heart was finally put down. The other elders also nodded and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Jiang Yuqing's tightly clenched fists in his sleeves relaxed a little. It's good that she succeeded. It's good that she succeeded. Many people's faces were filled with amazement. The Tianling scepter is really not easy to deal with. The third princess only succeeded after trying so many times. So it's considered a success, right? From now on, she will officially ascend to the throne. Boom! At this moment, a huge explosion suddenly sounded from the Tianling scepter. A terrifying wave spread in all directions. Shangguan's eyes flashed with shock. Before she could react, an unparalleled aura came toward her. Shangguan's body instantly flew backward. Bang! She fell heavily and rolled down the 9 flights of stairs. The crowd was in an uproar. However, at this moment, the Tianling scepter suddenly flew in a certain direction. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something. She looked up and saw the Tianling scepter flying toward her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 870. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The Tianling scepter was extremely fast, leaving a straight silver trail in the air. In an instant, it had already flown out of Lang Kuan Palace. It tore through the air and let out a sharp whistle. The sound of something breaking could be heard. Everyone looked over and was shocked to find that the barrier that Elder Chenku had set up had been easily pierced. One must know that Elder Chenku was an 8th-level pinnacle fighter. One could only imagine how strong the barrier's defensive power was. But in front of the Tianling scepter, it was like a thin piece of paper that was instantly pierced. Countless people looked up anxiously, their eyes following the Tianling scepter. It flew across the sky and headed straight for the crowd. An astonishing pressure spread out, and many people subconsciously retreated backward. Quick! Retreat! The power of the Tianling scepter was not something that they could easily withstand. Everyone was shocked and panicked. The few elders of the imperial family who were standing on the steps were also panicking when they saw this scene. Elder Chenku, what should we do? Should we think of a way to stop the Tianling scepter? Elder Chenku clenched his fists tightly and the wrinkles on his face seemed to have increased. Stop it? Easy for you to say. Even if the few of them joined forces, they might not be able to completely control the Tianling scepter. Furthermore, this thing seemed to have gone crazy for it to suddenly cause such a ruckus. He had witnessed 3 enthronement ceremonies but had never seen such a scene. But these were only thoughts in his heart. The situation was chaotic now. If they could not control it in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. Elder Chenku pondered for a moment and made a prompt decision. Quick! Activate the black magnetite. The black magnetite was the black crystal that held the Tianling scepter. There was a top-grade Xian formation carved on it, and it was specially used to suppress the Tianling scepter. Usually, the Xian formation on the black magnetite was activated and the Tianling scepter was in a state of deep sleep. Only during special times like this would they deactivate the Xian formation on the black magnetite. Once the heir to the imperial family successfully picked up the Tianling scepter and received its approval, the Xian formation on the black magnetite would be activated when it was placed back. But they did not expect that this time, they would have to do it. The elders hesitated for a moment. Once it was activated again, the black profound stone and the heaven-writ scepter would not be able to touch each other for a short period of time. At that time, the selection of a new emperor would have to be delayed. However, the heaven-writ scepter seemed to have slipped out of his control. Perhaps this was the only way. The few of them looked at each other and nodded resolutely. With a move of their bodies, they stood around the black mysterious stone and surrounded it. One of them stretched out his hand, and several rays of silver origin power flew out. Open! Wait! Elder Chenku suddenly cried out in alarm. The few elders quickly stopped and saw that Elder Chenku was looking in a certain direction with a shocked expression. They subconsciously looked over and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The originally orderly and lively crowd seemed to have been split from the middle by an invisible sharp sword. At the end of the crowd stood a woman in red. It was Chu Liwei. However, the heavenly command scepter actually stopped a foot away from her. For a moment, time seemed to stop flowing, and the surrounding space froze inch by inch. Between heaven and earth, there was complete silence. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Their hearts were filled with shock, and they were speechless. The heaven-writ scepter was extremely resistant to Shangguan and had mercilessly sent her flying. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of Chu Liwei. What was the meaning of this? After a short moment of shock, someone finally remembered Shangguan and stiffly turned around to look. At this moment, Shangguan had already rolled down the 9 steps. Perhaps because the energy fluctuation she had encountered earlier was too strong, she had struggled for a long time before she could stand up. However, at this moment she was really in a sorry state. There were several cuts on her face and hands, and she was bleeding profusely. Her originally exquisite and beautiful makeup was now completely ruined. Her veil had long been pulled down, and her cloud-like hair was messy. A luxurious phoenix hairpin hung crookedly in a lock of hair. It was unknown whether it was because she had suffered internal injuries, but her face looked incomparably pale. There were some black marks between her brows and the corners of her lips, making her look extremely strange. No one could have imagined that the third Princess Shangguan, who was still glamorous and lofty just a moment ago, would end up in such a state. Some people gradually regained their senses, and their expressions became very complicated. If they remembered correctly, Shangguan seemed to have been sent flying by the heaven-writ scepter's power just now, right? This was no longer a matter of whether she could pick up the heaven-writ scepter or not. This was a matter of enmity with the heaven-writ scepter. Although there had been chances of failure in the past, something like this had never happened before. As the third princess, Shangguan was a true Tianling royal bloodline. Such an action was no different from giving her a ruthless slap in front of so many people. Shangguan also felt extremely embarrassed. Her limbs were cold, and the blood in her body seemed to have frozen. Only her face was burning with pain. At this moment, everyone's gazes seemed to be filled with mockery and ridicule. Her mind kept replaying the scene just now, and she couldn't help but want to find a hole to hide in. Completely disappear. How are you? Jianghu reacted quickly and immediately walked over to Shangguan's side as he asked with furrowed brows. Shangguan was just about to speak when the blood in her chest surged, and she actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Jianghu was standing right beside her, and a lot of the blood splattered on him. His brows furrowed, but he still reached out to support Shangguan. Shangguan couldn't be bothered with him at this moment. After spitting out the blood, she still stubbornly and quickly raised her head to look at Chu Liwei in the crowd. Why is the heaven-writ scepter? She spat out a few words with difficulty, her eyes staring straight ahead. The hatred in her eyes was like a knife, as if she wanted to cut Chu Liwei into pieces. Jianghu also looked over with furrowed brows. How could he not be curious? In fact, at this very moment, everyone who saw this scene, both inside and outside of the huge Langquan Hall, was similarly puzzled. When did Chu Liwei have anything to do with the Tianling scepter? Why did it fly towards her out of nowhere? Especially when compared to Shangguan, this scene looked even more strange. Jianghu expression was grave. This Tianling scepter is extremely dangerous. Be careful. Before he finished speaking, the Tianling scepter seemed to have understood. It suddenly retracted the murderous aura around it and moved forward. It seemed to be trying to curry favor and act coquettishly. It gently poked Chu Liu's face. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 871. Jianghu's remaining words were stuck in his throat, and he almost choked to death. The expression on his face changed. How exciting! When the crowd saw this scene, they didn't react any better than Jianghu. They were all stunned. What was going on? Wasn't the Tianling scepter supposed to be majestic and inviolable? Wasn't it supposed to be that only the one who raised the Tianling scepter could wield imperial power and ascend to the top? Why did it suddenly become like this? The Tianling scepter was very domineering just a moment ago, sending the third princess flying. In the next second, it actually, in front of Chu Luiyue. Wasn't this too strange? The surroundings were extremely quiet. Countless pairs of eyes landed on Chu Luiyue with different expressions. Chu Luiyue was actually shocked herself. When she saw the Tianling scepter flying towards her, she had already guessed something in her heart. She just didn't expect it to treat her even more intimately than expected. Yes, intimately. When it flew in front of her and poked her face, the first thought that came to Chu Luiyue's mind was, the Tianling scepter seems to like her very much. This feeling came out of nowhere, but it was very real. Chu Luiyue blinked and looked at the Tianling scepter in front of her. At this moment, it was still enveloped in a layer of faint light. However, because it was very close to her, she could roughly see what it looked like. It was a cylindrical scepter that was completely black. It was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, and it was about 3 feet long. There seemed to be a dragon's head carved on the top, and the tail was sharper and seemed to be carved with some kind of pattern. Even though it had already restrained its aura, she could still vaguely feel the vast and majestic aura that seemed to come from an ancient time and space. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that the Tianling scepter was indeed coming for her. For a moment, an impulse surged in her heart, and she almost reached out to grab it. However, she didn't forget where she was, and she also didn't forget that there were countless pairs of eyes staring at her. Just as she was about to suppress the thoughts in her heart, a sharp voice filled with anger suddenly rang out. Chu Luiyue, how dare you? This shout was extremely ear-piercing, and it instantly caused many people to be jolted awake. Chu Luiyue also looked over. The person who spoke was Shangguan. At this moment, she was glaring at Chu Luiyue furiously. Her eyes were wide open and she looked furious. The Tianling scepter is a sacred object that the Tianling dynasty has worshipped for thousands of years. It is the symbol of imperial power. How can I allow you to defile me like this? Many people's expressions instantly changed. As long as one wasn't blind, they could clearly see that the heavens-writ scepter had flown towards Chu Luiyue of its own accord. It had also approached Chu Luiyue of its own accord. From the beginning to the end, Chu Luiyue stood in his position and did nothing. Shangguan said that she had defiled the heavenly writ scepter. Isn't that a bit of a distortion of the truth? Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Instead of being angry, she smiled and said softly, Third princess, do you mean that I was the one who summoned the heaven's writ scepter and controlled it to do all those things just now? Shangguan choked. If she said yes, wouldn't that mean that she had admitted that the heaven's writ scepter was controlled by a mere Chu Luiyue? If word got out, wouldn't the imperial family lose face? But if she said that it wasn't the heaven's writ scepter, why did it suddenly become so strange? It had rejected her approach and even injured her directly. But in the blink of an eye, it was so docile in front of Chu Luiyue. Even in the thousands of years of the Tianling dynasty's history, nothing like this had ever happened before. The most embarrassing thing was that the heaven's writ scepter was still quietly floating beside Chu Luiyue. It was as if it was set on following her and had no intention of returning. She was going to pick up the heaven's writ scepter. What was she going to do now? Shangguan's heart was filled with hatred. Chu Luiyue again. The night before, Jianghu poured out his heart to her and took the initiative to ask for her hand in marriage. Now, even the heaven's writ scepter had taken the initiative to follow him and stay by his side. Who knows if you use some kind of trick? Shangguan was almost blinded by anger. She pointed at Chu Luiyue and wanted to scold her, but Jianghu quickly stopped her. Calm down. He grabbed Shangguan's hand tightly and gave her a warning look. She should take a look at herself first. If she lost control of her emotions again and made a scene, it would be over. Shangguan bit her lip hard to control her emotions. Jianghu looked deeply at Chu Luiyue and the heaven's writ scepter in front of her. His mind was also in a mess. Elder Chinku. He called out. You have always been in charge of looking after the heaven's writ scepter. Do you know what is going on? Elder Chinku, who was called out, immediately walked over with a worried expression. This humble subject doesn't know what is going on either. The heaven's writ scepter rarely leaves the black mystic stone. You are the leader of the 8 great elders of the royal family and are personally in charge of these matters. If even you don't know, then who else can? Jiang Yuqing's tone turned cold. No matter what, you must bring the heaven's writ scepter back. If you delay the 3rd princess's ascension ceremony, you will be held accountable. Elder Chen Ku also cried out in his heart. What did this have to do with him? Not to mention that the Heaven's Writ Scepter had taken the initiative to look for Chu Luiwei and no one could do anything about it. Even if Chu Luiwei wasn't here, would Shangguan be able to lift it? Everything that had happened just now was still vivid in his mind. The Heaven's Writ Scepter was full of resistance towards Shangguan and wasn't even willing to let her touch it. Not to mention anything else. It would even delay her ascension ceremony. That would require her to have the ability to ascend the throne. Without the Heaven's Writ Scepter's approval, today's ceremony couldn't possibly continue. Elder Chen Ku's expression turned a little pale at this thought. Prince Consort, it's true that we are in charge of guarding the Heaven's Writ Scepter, but we have never been able to control it. Please forgive my incompetence, but I may not be able to do as you say. Jiang Yuqing immediately became anxious. Shangguan was even angrier when she heard this. She immediately raised her voice and pointed at Chu Luiwei. No matter what, you must bring the Heaven's Writ Scepter back to the Black Mystic Stone. Otherwise, how can I continue? Elder Chen Ku clasped his hands together and bowed. He said word by word, he said each word clearly. 3rd Princess, you know that the Heaven's Writ Scepter is a sacred item that has been passed down for thousands of years and has its own spirituality. If it acknowledges you, it will naturally agree to your request. No matter where it is, you will be able to lift it. It doesn't have to be on the Black Mystic Stone. However, if it doesn't acknowledge you, then even we can't do anything about it. Shangguan's face flushed red. Was he openly saying that she didn't have the right to inherit the throne? She clenched her fists and looked at Chu Luiwei. I order you to return the Heaven's Command Scepter immediately. I order you to return the Heaven's Command Scepter immediately. Chapter 872. This scene was simply too absurd and laughable. Shangguan was clearly the one with the royal bloodline and the heir to the throne, but now she was coldly reprimanding Chu Luiwei, who had nothing to do with her, and demanding that she return the Tianling scepter. If word got out, who knew how many people would laugh their heads off? Chu Luiwei was calm and composed as she lifted her chin. 3rd Princess, I did not take the Tianling scepter for myself, so how can I return it? If you want it back, why don't you come and get it yourself? Shangguan choked as her face flushed red. If it was really as easy as Chu Luiwei said, why would she have such a headache? This Tianling scepter was indeed a little strange. It had been very resistant to her from the start. Just now, when she asked the senior for help, she was directly blasted out and rolled down the 9 steps in front of everyone. Now, she did not dare to try again. She did not dare to imagine what would happen if the same thing happened a second time. But if she did not do anything, what would she do if the Tianling scepter really did not return? At this moment, it was still quietly floating in front of Chu Luiwei, as if it had become an item that she carried around with her. Jiang Yuqing gently pushed her. What? You are of royal bloodline after all. No matter what, the Tianling scepter should not do anything to you. You can go and ask for it yourself. Shangguan suddenly turned around and glared at him. Will not do anything to me? Did he not see the situation just now? She had already embarrassed herself once. If she failed again, she would lose all her face. But Jiang Yuqing's attitude was very firm. Aside from Shangguan, who else could take the initiative to help? Elder Chen Ku and the others were in charge of guarding the entire Longquan Palace and controlling the Xian array on the black magnetite. But they had clearly said that the Tianling scepter could not be controlled. Could it be that they were just going to watch? Shangguan gritted her teeth. Unable to persuade Jiang Yuqing, she could only take a step forward. She took a deep breath, looked at the oracle scepter, and tried to make her tone sound sincere. Junior Shangguan respectfully requests the return of the Heaven's Writ Scepter. As he spoke, the Tianling scepter remained motionless, as if it had no reaction at all. It had a certain level of intelligence, so naturally, it could understand Shangguan Wan's words. As a result, the situation instantly became even more awkward. The onlookers quieted down with different expressions on their faces. The heavenly writ scepter brushed him aside in disdain and ignored his request. After so many years, it seemed that Shangguan Wan was the only one, right? In this awkward silence, even the air seemed to have frozen. Shangguan Wan's face quickly turned red and then turned pale. Her body trembled slightly. He didn't know if it was because he was too angry or because he was too ashamed. In any case, at this moment, Shangguan Wan deeply understood what it meant to be ashamed and unable to show her face. At this moment, Chu Liyue's clear voice sounded, breaking the dead silence. "Hey, the third princess is inviting you back." Chu Liyue was speaking to the Tianling scepter. Although she also wanted to directly take the Tianling scepter in her hands, it didn't seem appropriate at this moment. The Tianling scepter finally moved after hearing her words. The fluorescent light around it flickered, as if it was breathing. Then, it actually flew directly to Chu Liyue's side, and then struck the ground. The end of the scepter landed on the white jade stone, making a soft sound. It was actually standing right beside Chu Liyue's leg, just a fist's distance away. As long as Chu Liyue stretched out his hand, he would be able to take it in his hand. Chu Liyue looked down, and the corners of his eyes twitched. Was he afraid that the matter wasn't big enough? This seemed to be even more hurtful than her directly snatching it. There was nothing more embarrassing than this. The contrast was so stark and intense that it was impossible to ignore it. On one side, Shangguan Wan was pleading with the Tianling scepter to return, but the Tianling scepter ignored her. On the other side, Chu Liyue was persuading the Tianling scepter to leave, but the Tianling scepter insisted on staying by her side. Everyone could see clearly that the Tianling scepter wanted to stay by Chu Liyue's side. The two ladies faced each other in the hall, and the atmosphere was strange. No one would have thought that something like this would happen during the coronation ceremony. Shangguan Wan stared deadly at Chu Liyue. There must be something wrong here. There were so many people present, so why did the Tianling scepter choose Chu Liyue? She wouldn't believe that she didn't have any tricks up her sleeves. Chu Liyue, what do you want? The Tianling scepter is the sacred item of the entire dynasty. Even if you want to play tricks, you should know your limits. How can you think of something like this? Shangguan Wan clenched her fists and reprimanded her. It's fine that you snatched the divine beast back then, but now, you won't even let go of the Tianling scepter left behind by the Taizu of the Shangguan family? You're too much. As soon as he said this, everyone was stunned. What did Shangguan Wan say? Snatch the divine beast? What was going on? Could it be that Chu Liyue snatched the divine beast that originally belonged to her? Chu Liyue's expression also calmed down. She looked at Shangguan Wan with a faint smile, and there seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. What do you mean by that, third princess? Why don't I understand? Shangguan Wan sneered. Back then, I went to the Dehuang swamp for Imperial Father. In the mystic forest, I happened to meet a demonic beast that was about to break through to the divine beast level. Unfortunately, there was a barrier outside and guards, so I couldn't get close. When I was fighting with that person, you took the opportunity to enter and contract with the demonic beast while it was going through the Tianlei tribulation. Many people have seen this. Do you still want to deny it? You snatched the divine beast, but I didn't pursue the matter because you were willing to use the divine beast's blood to treat Imperial Father. Being able to contract with that divine beast is also your ability. But this time, you still want to use tricks to snatch the Tianling scepter. I won't allow it. Everyone was in an uproar. They had long heard that Chu Liyue had returned after contracting with a divine beast, but they didn't know that there were so many twists and turns in this matter. If what Shangguan Wan said was true, then Chu Liyue's actions were indeed not honorable. Seeing that the surrounding people seemed to be gradually siding with her, Shangguan Wan finally felt a little better. She let out a long sigh and said, I know that you come from a lowly background, so it's inevitable that you'll be greedy when you see something good. Whatever you want, I've already tried my best to satisfy you. I even gave up this divine beast to you. But you're still not satisfied. If you want something, you have to do it in an upright manner. Every time you use such despicable thoughts and methods, even if you get it, it won't truly belong to you. And you, how can you be at ease? Shangguan Wan was certain that Chu Luiwei had used some tricks to make the Tianling scepter go crazy. Therefore, her words were very rude, mocking her both openly and secretly. When the surrounding people heard this, many of them also had doubts in their eyes. That's right. No matter how capable Chu Luiwei was, this Tianling scepter couldn't have gone looking for her for no reason. Could it be that she really did something in secret? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 873. Chu Luiwei listened to her patiently. However, she didn't show any shame or disdain for being exposed. Instead, she smiled. She hadn't even told Shangguan Wan these words, but the other party had already made the accusation. Her ability to distort the truth was not lost at all. It seems that in the third princess's eyes, I'm really someone who knows everything. Not only can I contract divine beasts as I wish, but I can also use the Tianling scepter as I wish. She spoke coldly, and a smile suddenly appeared on her lips. Since the third princess thinks so highly of me, wouldn't I be letting down the third princess's good intentions if I don't do anything? Shangguan Wan was originally quite pleased with herself. She thought that she had the upper hand and would force Chu Luiwei to back down. However, she felt uneasy after hearing what Lin Mingya said. Wasn't Chu Luiwei saying that she was belittling the Tianling scepter? I didn't mean it that way. Elder Chen Ku, there's something I'd like to ask. Chu Luiwei ignored Shangguan Wan and turned to look at Elder Chen Ku. What? Elder Chen Ku didn't expect Chu Luiwei to suddenly speak to him and was stunned. Chu Luiwei glanced at the Tianling scepter beside her, and her red lips curved up into a deep smile. Just as the third princess said, the Tianling scepter is a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. It's extremely honorable. It's rumored that whoever can pick up the Tianling scepter will successfully inherit the throne. What if I can do it? Elder Chen Ku's eyes widened in shock. Was Chu Luiwei crazy? Did she know what she was saying? Picking up the Tianling scepter, was she planning to openly usurp the throne? Impossible! Before Elder Chen Ku could react, Shangguan Wan was the first to deny it. Even if you used some method to make the Tianling scepter lose control, you can't pick it up, much less gain its approval. Shangguan Wan said this with great confidence. This was because the Tianling scepter had been left behind by Taizu. Since ancient times, only those with the Tianling royal bloodline could approach and obtain the Tianling scepter's recognition. What kind of background did Chu Luiwei have to have such thoughts? What wishful thinking? Oh, why don't we make a bet? Chu Luiwei was not annoyed and shrugged. Shangguan Wan became vigilant. What bet? If I can pick up this scepter and obtain its approval, then don't even think about it. Shangguan Wan immediately interrupted her rudely. Chu Luiwei, with your background, do you think you can be related to the Tianling royal family? Don't even think about it. If Chu Luiwei dared to say that she wanted to use this to fight for the throne, she would immediately send people to arrest Chu Luiwei and sentence her to death for the crime of rebellion. Chu Luiwei chuckled. Third princess, why are you in such a hurry? I haven't finished. What I want to bet is that if I can do this, then please reinvestigate the death of the crown princess. There was a loud bang. Chu Luiwei's words were like thunder, exploding in everyone's ears. Countless people widened their eyes in shock and looked at her in disbelief. What did Chu Luiwei just say? She wanted to reinvestigate the death of the crown princess? What did that mean? Didn't the crown princess die because she went crazy during her cultivation? Reinvestigate? Could it be that there was something fishy about the death of the crown princess? There were actually many people who had doubts about this matter, but in the past 2 years, they had all stopped investigating because of various reasons. Gradually, no one mentioned this matter anymore. There were even some people who didn't know why, but they kept everything about the crown princess a secret. The woman who was once as dazzling as the sun in the clouds finally fell like a meteor, completely disappearing and returning to silence. Very few people mentioned her again. When Chu Luiyue said that she wanted to bet, many people guessed that she would ask for something. But no matter how much they thought about it, they didn't expect that she was talking about this matter. Sheng Guanwan was also stunned. For a moment, she almost thought that she had heard wrong. What did you say? Chu Luiyue slowly repeated what she had just said. What? Third princess is unwilling. Do you know what you are saying? Jiang Yucheng finally reacted at this time. His face was covered in frost, and his brows were tightly knitted as he asked coldly. Back then, the crown princess passed away, and everything was already concluded. Now, you say that you want to reinvestigate. Could it be that you don't trust us? No matter how much he liked Chu Luiyue, he couldn't help it when he heard her say this. Small quarrels were harmless. Even if Chu Luiyue mocked and ridiculed Sheng Guanwan, he wouldn't mind too much. However, when it involved the Empress concubine, he couldn't show any mercy. Chu Luiyue didn't seem to hear the threat in his words and nodded honestly. That's right, I just don't trust you. Jiang Yucheng suddenly choked. After a while, he said, this matter is very important. How can we just let you say whatever you want? Isn't there the Tianling scepter? Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled. Could it be that the extremely noble Tianling scepter can't be exchanged for a chance to reinvestigate the crown princess's death? Chu Luiyue's words were too tricky. No one dared to say no. The crown princess's status was indeed noble and her reputation was extremely high. But compared to the Tianling scepter, she was still inferior. If she dared to say anything bad about the Tianling scepter, wouldn't she be slandering Taizu? Jiang Yucheng could only change his words. It's not that you can't, but if you insist, you have to at least produce evidence to prove that there was a mistake back then. There is indeed a problem with the crown princess's death. Otherwise, we definitely won't agree to this matter. Back then, they did it flawlessly and didn't leave behind any evidence. No matter why Chu Luiyue was suddenly involved in this matter, it was impossible to find any clues, let alone the truth of that year. However, when Chu Luiyue heard this, she nodded in an extremely relaxed manner. All right, as long as you agree to my conditions, I can produce evidence today. I hope that when the time comes, the third princess and prince consort won't go back on their words. Seeing Chu Luiyue's confident appearance, Jiang Yucheng's heart suddenly thumped and he felt a bit uneasy. Chu Luiyue definitely didn't have nothing better to do to make such a fuss in front of so many people. She was so determined. Could it be that she really, this consort agrees to your conditions? Without waiting for him to refuse, Sheng Guanwan had already agreed. If you can pick up the Tianling scepter and obtain its approval, this consort will agree to let you investigate again. However, if you can't do it, then take your own life to atone for your crimes. Respect the Tianling scepter. How about it? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luiyue only wanted to investigate the crown princess's death, but Sheng Guanwan was planning to kill Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue lifted her chin slightly and smiled slowly. Her gaze was as sharp as a blade. Alright, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 874. No one had expected things to develop to this stage. Chu Luiyue had actually gambled with her own life in exchange for a chance to investigate the crown princess's death. After a short silence, the crowd broke out into a commotion. Is Chu Luiyue crazy? What is she thinking? She's willing to pay any price to investigate the crown princess's death? Didn't she come from a small place outside Heaven's Canopy? How did she get involved with the crown princess? I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out. In these 2 years, there were also people who wanted to do this, but they all gave up in the end. Isn't she just finding trouble for herself? What can she do by herself? Aren't you all curious as to why Chu Luiyue dared to make such a claim? Looking at the Tianling scepter's attitude towards her, I think she might be able to do it. Since when was someone without the Tianling royal bloodline able to do such a thing? This was actually the question that everyone was most curious about. No matter how they thought about it, the Tianling scepter shouldn't have anything to do with Chu Luiyue, right? Jiang Yucheng also heard a lot of these whispers. He looked at Chu Luiyue and those familiar eyes, and an extremely absurd thought suddenly appeared in his mind. However, he immediately shook his head forcefully and dismissed the idea. Impossible. Shang Guanyu had already been raped to death back then, and her soul had already dissipated. It was impossible for her to still be alive. At that time, he had repeatedly confirmed that there was no mistake. But no matter how much he tried to convince himself, there was still a doubtful voice that didn't dissipate. If Chu Luiyue really had nothing to do with Shang Guanyu, then why would she get involved in this matter? Also, the Tianling scepter didn't care about so many people, even Shang Guanwan, a proper royal princess, but it treated Chu Luiyue differently. He finally could not help but look at Mu Qinghe, who was not far away, only to see that he was also looking at Chu Luiyue with a shocked and confused expression. As the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry, he was personally in charge of the security inside and outside the palace. Lang Kuan Hall was the most important, so he had always been guarding it. Jiang Yuqing frowned. Chu Luiyue was personally brought back by Mu Qinghe. When he first met Chu Luiyue, he was suspicious of her and asked Mu Qinghe to secretly investigate her. The result of the investigation was that there was no problem with Chu Luiyue's identity. She was indeed the abandoned daughter of a declining family that grew up in country Yaochen. By chance, she changed her fate and finally arrived at West Hill after going through many difficulties. But now, what was going on? Jiang Yuqing was getting more and more nervous. He felt that things were getting out of his control and were heading in an unknown direction. Even he was not sure what would happen in the end. However, at this moment, Jiang Yuqing was not the only one who was shocked. Mu Qinghe stared at Chu Luiyue, who was not far away. When he heard her words, he was also shocked. She wants to investigate the death of the princess. Who exactly is she? At this moment, Hong Yao also flew out. Looking at its green wings, it seemed to be a little agitated, and its pair of round eyes stared closely at Chu Luiyue on the other side. It was unknown if it was waiting or hoping for something. A thought suddenly popped up in Mu Qinghe's mind, and his body stiffened. His lips moved slightly as he called Hong Yao back. Hong Yao. Hearing that something was wrong with his voice, Hong Yao finally turned around to take a look. There seemed to be endless undercurrents surging in Mu Qinghe's eyes. Who is she? Everyone's gaze was focused on Chu Luiyue at this point. She lowered her head and glanced at the Tianling scepter. She didn't want to be so ostentatious, but since it gave her so much face, then there was no need to be polite. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue's gaze focused, and she reached out to the dragon head carved at the top. Actually, the Tianling scepter was right beside her, within reach. Therefore, Chu Luiyue only moved her arm, and her fingers were already on the Tianling scepter. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths and were extremely nervous as they stared intently. Buzz. The expected resistance and rejection did not happen. The moment Chu Luiyue's hand officially held the Tianling scepter, a buzzing sound rang out. At the same time, the sparkling radiance on it quickly gathered and finally gathered at the eyes of the dragon head. Swoosh! The dragon's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. A golden ray of light shot out from within. It shot straight into the clouds. In an instant, the light shone brightly. It illuminated the world. The sacred light scattered and enveloped Chu Luiyue. The wind whistled, and her clothes fluttered. Her black hair fluttered. At a glance, it was incomparably noble. At this moment, Chu Luiyue only felt that the force in her body seemed to have been guided by something, and it quickly surged. It was almost boiling. It was as if something that originally belonged to her had finally returned. It was a perfect fit. Almost instinctively, she held the scepter and raised it high. In the sky, clouds quickly gathered. With the golden light from the Tianling scepter as the center, a huge storm quickly gathered. It covered the sky and covered the sun. It was majestic. The next moment, Chu Luiyue waved her wrist lightly. A majestic aura, wrapped in a biting, cold, murderous intent, rushed straight toward Shang Guanwan. Shang Guanwan was shocked and immediately wanted to retreat. But how could her speed compare to the attack of the Tianling scepter? Boom! That terrifying power flew past her left shoulder, instantly slicing off a large piece of flesh on her shoulder. Ugh! Shengguan cried out in shock and flew backward, then fell hard onto the ground. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her back and left shoulder were in pain, and a few of her ribs seemed to have been broken. Her internal organs felt like they were squeezed into a ball, and it was so uncomfortable that it felt like it was going to explode. She struggled to get up, full of resentment. Just as she was about to scold Chu Luiyue, she suddenly heard a cold gasp from the crowd. Shengguan immediately felt that something was wrong. Looking at the crowd, she instantly saw countless pairs of frightened and disgusted eyes. They were looking at her. Shengguan suddenly realized that something was wrong, and only then did she realize that her face was burning with pain. She knew that something was wrong and immediately touched her face. It was rough and sticky to the touch, and it was extremely terrifying. Her mask had actually fallen off. Digression will continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 875. Shengguan's heart was instantly filled with endless panic and fear. She screamed and immediately covered her face with her hands. However, everyone had already seen it clearly while she was in a daze. That originally beautiful face had suddenly become extremely ugly with scars all over it. From afar, it looked like centipedes were covering her face. It was frightening. The surrounding crowd instantly fell into a strange silence. Many people looked at each other in confusion. It was no wonder that the third princess had refused to leave Huayang Palace after returning from Dahuang Swamp. After a long time, more and more people came to see her, and the matters that she had to deal with personally became more and more troublesome. Only then did she begin to see people again. However, under most circumstances, she still wouldn't leave the palace. Everyone thought that she had really gotten injured because of His Majesty and needed to rest in bed. However, they didn't know that this was the reason behind it. Her appearance had been completely ruined. Feeling countless gazes on her, Shengguan was filled with hatred, anger, and resentment. Even though she had already gotten the divine beast blood from Chu Luiyue and the injuries on her face had started to improve, she hadn't fully recovered yet because she had just applied the medicine. The deep and shallow scars were much better than when her face was constantly festering, but in the eyes of the crowd, they were still extremely terrifying. Shengguan trembled all over. She wanted nothing more than to disappear from this place immediately. The surroundings were extremely quiet, but it made her feel extremely tormented. Your Highness. When Chan Yi, who was standing behind, saw this situation, she was the first to react. She hurriedly rushed forward, wanting to help Shengguan up. Get lost. Shengguan pushed Chan Yi away. At this moment, everyone was just laughing at her. She simply struggled to stand up. From the corner of her eye, she saw the tattered mask that had fallen to the ground. However, it was only a thin layer. It was stained with dust and blood, and looked extremely dirty. It was as if her face had been torn off and trampled on. She slowly raised her head and looked at Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were filled with hatred, as if she wanted nothing more than to eat his flesh and drink his blood. You did it on purpose. Shengguan's every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between her teeth, carrying a deep anger and resentment. There were only a few people who knew that her looks had been disfigured. Chu Luiyue had obviously done this to embarrass her in front of everyone. Chu Luiyue looked at her with an apologetic expression. Ah, third princess, I'm really sorry. My hand slipped just now. Are you all right? Slipped. Once. Shengguan was so angry that she almost laughed. She had really underestimated Chu Luiyue. He could even make up such a reason. Chu Luiyue held the Tianling scepter in her hand. There were so many people present, so why did it hit her? Furthermore, he had even removed her mask. If he didn't do it on purpose, Shengguan wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. You bitch. Just as Shengguan was about to scold him, Jianghu, who was beside her, immediately spoke up and forcefully interrupted her. He walked over with a solemn face. You're injured. It's better to have your injuries checked first. Leave the rest to me. Sheng Guanwan was already mad with anger. If she was allowed to continue, who knew what would happen? Magistrate Zhua. He shouted at Zhua Mingxi. Zhua Mingxi hurried forward. I'll leave third princess's injuries to you. Yes. Zhua Mingxi responded and took out a pill. Your Highness, please take this medicine first. Looking at her, not to mention her external injuries, her internal injuries were also quite serious. Sheng Guanwan was about to shake off Jiang Yuqing's hand when she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her body. Her face suddenly paled, and cold sweat dripped down with a shwa sound. Jiang Yuqing took the medicine. Take the medicine first. Sheng Guanwan raised her head with difficulty and glanced at him. There wasn't the slightest bit of heartache in his eyes. There was only coldness and indifference, as well as a hint of warning. That was a warning to her not to cause trouble at this time. Sheng Guanwan's heart suddenly felt sour. Although she already knew that he didn't have any feelings for her, she was injured at this time. Her scars were exposed in front of so many people. She had no face left. He still wasn't moved in the slightest. Ever since she made a scene with him yesterday, he wasn't even willing to act anymore. He wasn't the least bit worried that she would be mocked and ridiculed after today. The despair in Sheng Guanwan's heart surged like a tide and gradually drowned her. Jiang Yuqing fed her the pill. She opened her mouth mechanically and swallowed it. Then, under Jiang Yuqing's signal, Chani and Zhua Mingxi stepped forward to check her injuries. After taking her pulse, Zhua Mingxi was shocked. There seemed to be two forces crazily fighting inside Sheng Guanwan's body. If it wasn't resolved quickly, it would be dangerous. Your Highness, your injuries are more serious. Why don't you go and treat them first? Zhua Mingxi said carefully. Sheng Guanwan directly refused. She gritted her teeth and stared at Chu Luiyue. This consort isn't leaving. Today was her wedding day and also the day of her coronation ceremony. She was the main character today. Why should she leave? The coronation ceremony hadn't even started yet. Why should she leave? She wanted to see what kind of waves Chu Luiyue could stir up today. Zhua Mingxi looked at Jiang Yuqing for help. Jiang Yuqing didn't force her. It was fine as long as Sheng Guanwan knew how powerful she was. If she really left, the situation today would be even worse. He nodded. Take good care of the third princess. With that, he turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue. His face no longer had the gentle smile from the beginning of the wedding. Now, it was cold and there was even some anger in his eyes. Chu Luiyue, do you know what kind of crime it is to intentionally hurt the third princess? Even he thought that Chu Luiyue's attack just now was intentional. Chu Luiyue sighed softly and glanced at the Tianling scepter in her hand. At this time, the golden pillar of light that pierced through the clouds had gradually dissipated. Only the pair of dragon eyes were still shining with the resplendent light. They were bright, dazzling, and full of power. How could she explain so that they would believe that she really didn't do it on purpose just now, but that the Tianling scepter did it on its own? At that time, it was in the midst of awakening and its aura was erupting. Before she could react, it had already launched that attack at Sheng Guanwan. In her opinion, that attack was more like a warning than an attack. Otherwise, Sheng Guanwan's injuries wouldn't have stopped there. Thinking of this, she narrowed her eyes and looked at Sheng Guanwan. To be honest, it was the Heaven's Writ Scepter that made its move just now, said the Heaven's Writ Scepter. Chapter 876. You're spouting nonsense. When Sheng Guanwan heard this, she immediately retorted. Why would the Tianling scepter do this for no reason? I'm of the Tianling royal family's bloodline. Even if someone had tried to pick up the Tianling scepter and failed, they had never heard of the Tianling scepter attacking anyone of its own accord. Chu Luiyue's words were simply too laughable. That's right. With your status, what exactly did you do to provoke the Tianling scepter to do this? Chu Luiyue smiled faintly and asked in return. If I remember correctly, when you tried to pick up the Tianling scepter just now, it seemed to have resisted you a little. Sheng Guanwan was about to go on a crusade against Chu Luiyue, but when she heard this, she instantly choked. The rest of her words were stuck in her throat. It was extremely uncomfortable, but she couldn't say it no matter what. She instantly felt guilty, and her eyes darted around. Actually, she had also realized this problem. The Tianling scepter had been very rude to her from the start, and it had no intention of submitting to her. Later on, when she asked for help from the senior, it had directly exploded and sent her flying. Could it be because of this? She was in a fit of anger just now, so she didn't care and scolded it. But now, Chu Liuyue's words made her uncertain again. If it was really because of this, she clenched her teeth and braced herself. I don't know what you're talking about. The surrounding people's expressions all became a little strange. Chu Liuyue's words weren't without reason. From the moment Shangguan tried to pick up the Tianling scepter, everything had been going wrong. Something didn't seem right. Even if she couldn't pick it up and didn't receive the Tianling scepter's acknowledgement, she shouldn't have been knocked down from the top and rolled down the 9 steps, right? Could it really be that there was something wrong with Shangguan? Why? Don't try to absolve yourself of the blame. You clearly know this consort's face. Back then, this consort became like this because your demonic beast scratched me. Now that you're treating this consort like this in public, aren't you just trying to embarrass this consort? When Shangguan saw that the situation was not right, she immediately changed the topic. She restrained the anger and resentment on her face and lowered her head to complain tearfully, as if she had been wronged. Chu Luiyue sneered inwardly. She wanted to throw dirty water on her? That would depend on whether or not she was willing to accept it. Third princess, you've misunderstood me. When your face was scratched, I hadn't formed a contract with it yet. I really didn't do it on purpose. As for the trouble dumpling caused previously, although it had nothing to do with me, I still felt very apologetic. After I came back, I went straight to the palace to offer the blood of the mythological beast to His Majesty and you. If I really wanted to make things difficult for you, why would I do this? Chu Liuyue's tone was light and his expression was sincere. Shangguan was so angry that her chest rose and fell violently. Her eyes widened and her chest rose and fell violently, but she couldn't say a single word. She had clearly taken the initiative to ask for the blood of the mythological beast, so how did it become her offering the treasure in Chu Liuyue's mouth? Lies really came easily from his mouth. However, even though Shangguan was extremely angry, she couldn't refute it. Could it be that she had to admit in public that she had forced Chu Liuyue to take out the blood of the mythological beast? Seeing Shangguan's guilty appearance, many people secretly despised her. Since it was a mistake made before the contract was formed, then this matter naturally had nothing to do with Chu Liuyue. It was already very rare for her to be willing to take the initiative to help, but Shangguan actually made a false accusation. It was obvious what kind of person she was. At this time, Jianghu finally spoke. Even so, it's a fact that you hurt the third princess. You should take responsibility for it. In front of everyone, he naturally had to stand on Shangguan's side. Moreover, he wasn't sure of Chu Liuyue's identity and didn't know what she was planning to do. Naturally, he was extremely vigilant. Chu Liuyue glanced at the Tianling scepter. She really knew how to cause more trouble than she did. The Tianling scepter trembled imperceptibly. After this matter, I will naturally do what I have to do. But now, the winner of this bet can be decided, right? As Chu Liuyue spoke, she raised her arm and flipped her wrist. Swoosh. She held the Tianling scepter tightly in her hand and pointed the dragon's head directly at Jianghu. Jianghu's heart trembled. He didn't know why, but when he met those golden dragon eyes, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. It was as if everything about him had been seen through. He instinctively looked away and frowned. I have already picked up the Tianling scepter and obtained its approval. Chu Liuyue's eyes narrowed dangerously. Her red lips parted slightly, but her eyes were cold. Can we start investigating the crown princess's death again? There was silence in front of the huge Lang Kuan palace. Chu Liuyue held the Tianling scepter in her hand, and her dragon eyes shone brightly. Everyone understood that Chu Liuyue had indeed won this bet. When they heard her mention investigating the crown princess's death again, many people had complicated expressions. Who would have thought that this grand and solemn ceremony would end up like this? Almost everyone looked at Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing. In front of everyone, they couldn't break the contract on the spot. This time, they had to investigate. Jiang Yuqing stared intently at Chu Luiyue. After a long while, he said, "All right." Chapter 877. How should she put it? In her previous life, she did not have the chance to wait until the day of her wedding. Naturally, she did not get to see the Tianling scepter. In Chu Luiyue's heart, the Tianling scepter had always been a very dignified and sacred existence. It was high up and could not be blasphemed. So today, when the Tianling scepter flew towards her, she was both surprised and happy. With the Tianling scepter in her hand, it seemed to make up for all the regrets she had in the past. No one had ever told her that the Tianling scepter was so clingy. Looking at the Tianling scepter in front of her, which was so happy that it was waiting to be praised, even someone as strong as Chu Luiyue felt that she could not take it for a moment. "If you are happy, why don't you consider me? There are so many people watching." Under normal circumstances, Chu Luiyue did not really care about other people's gazes. Only at this moment did he feel as though he was burning. Cough. Chu Luiyue clenched her fist and coughed. Then she stretched out her hand and pushed it. "Well, I think you should go back." The Tianling scepter did not seem to hear her and continued to swing its head around. It did not seem to have any intention of going back. Swoosh! Something flashed in front of Chu Luiyue's eyes. Tuanzi suddenly flew out and faced the Tianling scepter as it widened its round eyes. "I told you to go back. Why are you still here?" The Tianling scepter paused and swayed in another position, circling around Chu Luiyue's hand. "Why do you care? It is not a divine beast. Why are you jealous of it?" Dumpling was confused. Chu Luiyue was speechless. One was a divine beast, and the other was a sacred object. Neither one of them would be envied. But why did she feel an inexplicable sense of embarrassment? Seeing that they were going to continue arguing, Chu Luiyue made a prompt decision. She grabbed Dumpling's wings and put it on her shoulder. However, as soon as he let go, Dumpling struggled and rushed out again. The Tianling scepter also jumped back and forth as if it was provoking him. Chu Luiyue held his forehead helplessly. Finally, he couldn't help but shout, "Don't make a fuss." It was finally quiet. The Tianling scepter obediently stood to the side, and Dumpling once again nestled on Chu Luiyue's shoulder. Chu Luiyue heaved a long sigh of relief and looked at Jiang Yuqing. "Well, I've already tried my best. I really can't do anything about this kind of thing." Jiang Yuqing's expression was very strange. It couldn't be helped. No one would be able to remain calm after witnessing such a scene. However, Jiang Yuqing was someone who had seen a lot. He quickly calmed down. Seeing that the Tianling scepter was really sticking to Chu Luiyue and refusing to leave, Shangguan Wan would only lose more face if they continued to dwell on this issue. The best way was to ignore it for now. Therefore, Jiang Yuqing directly changed the topic. "Let's not talk about this matter for now. As for what you said just now, we will send a small team to investigate again. No need." Chu Luiyue chuckled and interrupted Jiang Yuqing. "That would be too troublesome. Let's just start here." "Well, what?" Jiang Yuqing was also stunned for a moment. For a moment, he didn't know what Chu Luiyue meant. Even Shangguan Wan could not help but open her mouth again and scold him coldly. "Start here? How can that be? Chu Luiyue, get it straight. This is Langkuan Palace. How can you be so presumptuous here? Not only did you rely on the Tianling scepter to steal the limelight, you actually want to start investigating Shangguan Yu's death here? You're thinking too much." Jiang Yuqing also frowned. After all, today is the day of my wedding with the third princess. Even if Jiang Yuqing didn't care much about Shangguan Wan, he still attached great importance to this wedding. Shangguan Wan's side had already caused enough trouble. If Shangguan Yu's death was also brought up, it would really be a mess. Upon hearing Jiang Yuqing's words, Shangguan Wan's face also carried a hint of resentment. "Chu Luiyue, you insist on doing this. Could it be that you don't want to see this consort happy? On this consort's wedding day, You deliberately brought up this consort. Are you sincerely cursing this consort? Chu Luiwei widened his eyes in confusion. Third princess, where did this come from? Didn't you always say that the crown princess is the elder sister that you respect the most? Why do you feel that mentioning her today is a curse to you? Shangguan Wan immediately choked and was speechless. Chu Luiwei chuckled. Her Highness the Crown Princess has always doted on you. If she knew that you were getting married to the prince consort today, I'm sure that she would be happy for you. Don't you think so? Shangguan Wan suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It went straight to the top of her head. Enough. She rudely interrupted Chu Luiwei's words. Just do whatever you want to do. At that time, Shangguan Yu was already dead, and all the evidence and clues were basically destroyed. There was no way to investigate at all. She didn't believe that these people would be able to find anything 2 years later. Jiang Yuqing subconsciously wanted to stop her, but Shangguan Wan had already spoken. He slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. For some reason, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. Many thanks for third princess's understanding. Chu Luiwei smiled in response, then took a step forward. Everyone looked over with different expressions on their faces. Chu Luiwei looked straight at Jiang Yuqing. The smile on her face gradually faded, and there seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. Back then, the crown princess's funeral was jointly managed by the third princess and the prince consort. Then, the two of you are the ones who know the most about everything, right? Jiang Yuqing didn't know what she was going to do, but he still nodded. That's right. At that time, he was still a low-level fiancé, and Shangguan Wan was the only one who was slightly older among the heirs of the imperial family. Naturally, the two of them were in charge. Everyone was aware of this. That's good. I have a few questions that I want to ask the two of you first. Chu Luiwei raised a finger. First, when something happened to the crown princess, it was you who discovered it first, right? Yes. Jiang Yuqing answered without hesitation. These questions had already been asked by countless people. He, Shangguan Wan, and the others had already made up a set of excuses. Even if Chu Luiwei asked him 100 times in public, he would still say the same thing. That day, the crown princess said that she wanted to cultivate and try to break through to the 9th stage, so she chose to go into seclusion. But not long after, I noticed that something was wrong. When I barged in, I found that the crown princess was already dying. Jiang Yuqing spoke very smoothly and calmly, as if the scene that day was really like that. Chu Luiwei raised a second finger. All right. Second question. Why didn't the crown princess cultivate earlier or later? Why did she have to try to break through to the 9th stage on such an important day before the wedding? All cultivators know that breaking through is risky, and the higher the level, the longer it takes to break through. Could it be that she doesn't want to participate in the wedding the next day? Chapter 878. Jiang Yuqing was still able to respond easily. No one knew what the empress concubine was thinking. But everyone knew that apart from the wedding, the next day was also her ascension ceremony. Perhaps she did this to pick up the Tianling scepter and stand on it in a better posture. Moreover, she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian. Breaking through to rank 9 might be unattainable for ordinary cultivators. But for her it might be much easier. These words were not without reason. Not long after the empress concubine was born, she was tested to have a Tianjing Yuan meridian. Since then, she had been the top genius of the entire Tianling dynasty. Whether it was martial cultivation, Shen master, or celestial physician, she was extremely talented. It wasn't strange for her to have such thoughts. Chu Luiwei nodded thoughtfully and then asked, "Why are you here?" In that case, why didn't the empress concubine go to the ancestral hall if she planned to focus on breaking through? I remember that the ancestral hall of the Tianling royal family was also destroyed because of this, right? As the heir to the Tianling throne, what's wrong with going to the ancestral hall? Jiang Yuqing asked. Of course there's nothing wrong with it. According to this, the empress concubine was in the ancestral hall the entire day before yesterday? And eldest young Master Jiang, you were guarding outside the entire time? Of course. The people who served her that day can testify to this. Jiang Yuqing had already answered these questions countless times, so he was completely at ease. His brows gradually furrowed as he looked at Chu Luwei and said coldly, "If the reinvestigation you're talking about is asking these questions again in front of everyone, then let me tell you, this is meaningless. If you really have doubts about what happened back then, you have to produce evidence. Otherwise, there's no need to continue. I haven't finished asking yet." Chu Luwei smiled and suddenly looked at Yu Qisong. "Master, you should also have some questions to ask eldest young Master Jiang, right?" Hearing this, everyone turned to look at Wei Qisong. Wei Qisong nodded, looked at Jiang Yuqing and said in a deep voice, "Previously, this old man had made a trip to Thousand View Gardens' zither room to retrieve some of the items I had left there. However, there was something wrong with Empress Concubine's Phoenix Tail zither." Hearing the words, Phoenix Tail zither, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly sank. Everyone knows that the Empress Concubine loved that zither very much when she was alive. However, this old man discovered that the Empress Concubine had left a Xian formation on it. Wei Qisong stared intently at Jiang Yuqing and enunciated every word clearly. "Although this old man isn't a top-notch mystic cultivator, I have dabbled in this aspect. The Xian formation that the Empress Concubine had engraved on the zither was only a level 3 Xian formation. But the important thing was that the name of the Xian formation was Dragon Trapping Formation. If there really isn't any problem, then why did Princess leave such a profound formation on the zither that she likes so much? In this old man's opinion, the level and power of that Xian formation are not worth mentioning, but the name of that Xian formation is very meaningful. Dragon Trapping Formation. When a dragon is trapped, it seeks help from the outside. The Empress Concubine had clearly encountered danger, so she left this Xian formation, hinting that she had been harmed by a traitor. Once this was said, everyone was shocked. If what Yu Qisong said was true, then there really was a big problem with this matter. One had to know that the Empress Concubine had outstanding talent in this aspect since she was young. It was absolutely impossible for her to leave a mere level 3 Xian formation on such a precious item. Yu Qisong's explanation was the only reasonable answer. Jiang Yuqing was greatly alarmed and clenched his fists tightly. He had been careless. He had been in charge of the zither room for 2 years, but he had never discovered that there was such a hint on the zither. At that time, it was in the zither room. After Shangguanyu finished playing a song, he brought the last cup of tea to Shangguanyu, luring her poison to act up. After that, she quickly realized that something was wrong and wanted to resist. But at that time, she was already no match for Jiang Yuqing. In the end, he secretly brought her back to the palace and locked her in the imperial family's ancestral hall. At that time, he had always thought that everything had progressed smoothly. But now that he thought about it, she had indeed struggled and stayed by the zither for quite a long time. Could it be that the Xian formation was left behind at that time? Jiang Yuqing tried his best to calm himself down and said with a cold expression, "Pavilion Master Yuqi, you have to pay attention to evidence when you speak. The evidence is on the Phoenix Tail zither." Yu Qisong immediately said, "You have always been in charge of the zither room. As long as you send someone to retrieve the Phoenix Tail zither, we will know at a glance." When everyone heard this, they felt that it was very reasonable and all looked at Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing pursed his lips. At this moment, he finally understood that the secret Yu Qisong had discovered in the zither room that day was actually this. No wonder his attitude changed so much after that. It turned out that he was already certain that someone had harmed Shangguanyu. As one of the closest people to Shangguanyu and the one who accompanied Shanghai Yu to the zither room the most, his suspicions were naturally the greatest. The Phoenix Tail zither was lost some time ago. Jiang Yuqing took a deep breath and said, at this moment he was incomparably glad that the zither was gone. Otherwise, if the evidence was verified and it was as Wei Qisong had said, there was no way he could clear his name. Everyone was in an uproar. Lost? How could such an important thing be lost? Hasn't Jiang Yuqing always been in charge of the zither room? How could it be lost for no reason? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Low voices of doubt could be heard from the crowd. Jiang Yuqing was also somewhat embarrassed. But at this moment, this was undoubtedly the best excuse. It was my incompetence that led to the loss of the phoenix tail zither. I've been sending people to secretly search for it, but there hasn't been any progress. I'm afraid that this lead will be cut off for the time being. Jiang Yuqing looked a little ashamed, but his eyes were very resolute. Without the zither, there's no way to prove whether what Pavilion Master Yuqi said was true or false. Pavilion Master Yuqi, it's not that I don't trust you, but this is a serious matter. Without concrete evidence, I don't dare to say anything. Yuqi Song asked in return. In other words, you'll only admit to my words if we find the phoenix tail zither? Jiang Yuqing paused. Yes. Without the phoenix tail zither, everything that happened today would not have been able to continue. Everything would have been empty talk. Many people looked disappointed. They thought that they had finally found some clues, but they didn't expect it to be gone just like that. If the crown princess was really harmed, then the longer this dragged on, the harder it would be to find out the truth. At this moment, Yuqi Song suddenly said, "What a coincidence! What a coincidence! Yesterday, someone delivered a gift to this old man." Jiang Yuqing suddenly looked up. Then he saw Yuqi Song wave his sleeve, and a zither appeared in front of him. It was the phoenix tail zither. It's just right here. Why don't we take a look at it ourselves? Digression. The 5th chapter is about to be updated. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 879. The expression on Jiang Yuqing's face finally cracked, and he cried out in shock, "Why is this thing with you? Could it be that the person who secretly broke into the zither room and stole this phoenix tail zither was Yuqi Song? That person's aura was hidden extremely well. He had never thought that it would be related to Yuqi Song. Didn't this old man say just now? This is a big gift sent by someone yesterday." Yuqi Song stroked his beard and showed the phoenix tail zither to everyone. Everyone can take a look and see if this is the zither that the Empress concubine had back then. Everyone looked at each other and fell silent for a moment. Eldest young Master Jiang should be the most familiar with this thing. Why don't you check it out? Otherwise, someone will say that this old man took a fake thing and created a rumor out of thin air here. As Yuqi Song spoke, he even pushed it forward. Jiang Yuqing was standing 10 steps away. With his eyesight, from the moment he saw this thing, he had already confirmed that this was indeed the one that was lost in the zither room. However, he really couldn't figure out why this thing would be with Yuqi Song. He said that someone sent it yesterday. Who was that person? Let me take a look. In the quiet and strange atmosphere, a person walked out. It was Yuan Wei. He walked over with a smile. Back then, Her Highness the Empress concubine liked this zither very much and specially asked me to prepare many matching items. Therefore, I am quite familiar with this thing. I will identify it. Everyone should trust me, right? Yuqi Song handed the item over. Please. Although Yuan Wei's position wasn't comparable to the three dukes, his status was also very noble because his family had been passed down for thousands of years. His words carried a lot of weight. Yuan Wei carefully took the phoenix tail zither and looked around carefully. His expression gradually became serious. After a moment, he nodded. This is indeed the Empress concubine's item. Moreover, there is indeed a dragon trapping array inside this zither. Let me take a look too. Jian Shai finally couldn't help but come over and take a look. There seemed to be a glimmer of light flickering on the phoenix-tailed zither. Flipping it over, one could see that there was indeed a palm-sized Xian formation at the bottom, and it was shining brightly. Jiang Yuqing's mind was in chaos. Back then, he had only been focused on dealing with the Shangguan Yu and hadn't paid much attention to the phoenix tail zither. In the past 2 years, he had rubbed the rosin on the phoenix tail zither countless times, but he had never noticed this. Thinking of this, he immediately said, "This Xian formation didn't exist before. I've never seen a Xian formation like this before. It was only a level 3 Xian formation, and any Xian master could carve it on it." Pavilion Master Yuchi, even if you suspect that there's a problem with the princess's death, there's no need to use such methods to deceive everyone, right? Wei Qisong laughed coldly when he heard this. Of course you didn't see it before because there was a seal on the Xian formation. It was only after this old man broke the seal that this profound formation was revealed. Jiang Yuqing froze on the spot. What seal? He actually knew nothing about this. This is indeed the dragon trapping array. And this aura is indeed from the princess's hands. Jian Shai nodded affirmatively. Because the material of this phoenix tail zither is extremely precious and special, ordinary people can't leave any traces on it. Although this Xian formation is only a level 3 Xian formation, the person who can do this is definitely a top-notch Xian master. If I'm not wrong, the princess should have used the power of her Tianjing Yuan meridian to seal this Xian formation and conceal its aura. Yu Qisong stroked his beard. That's right. This old man only saw this dragon trapping array after breaking the seal. Shangguan Yu's strength had already reached level 8 Xian master back then. If she wanted to hide something, it definitely wouldn't be a difficult matter. Jiang Yuqing's heart kept sinking, and his entire body turned ice-cold. He had overlooked it. He had truly overlooked it. He had actually forgotten that he wasn't Shangguan Yu's opponent at all, which was why he couldn't even see through her methods. And now, all of this had become conclusive evidence. After that, a few more people came forward to take a look. They all nodded and confirmed that this was indeed left behind by the princess back then. Because she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian, her aura was very easy to recognize. Anyone with some status in the Tianling dynasty would be able to confirm it with just one look. And what's this? As Jianshai spoke, he suddenly saw that there seemed to be something under the Xian formation. He moved closer and his expression changed slightly. There's a word of blood on it. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. If nothing really happened, why would there be a word of blood on the phoenix tail zither? Moreover, she used such complicated methods to conceal it. Jiang Yuqing's heart thumped violently. It almost jumped out of his chest. All the blood in his body seemed to freeze at this moment. No, everything happened very quickly back then. Shangguan Yu couldn't possibly have the time and energy to do all this. Jiang Yuqing kept admonishing himself, but there was still a voice in the depths of his heart that kept ringing. Why not? She was smart and quick-witted. Was there anything she couldn't do? This word of blood was also left behind by the princess. Jian Shai's expression had completely turned cold. Yuan Wei and the others who were standing nearby also had a change in expression. Naturally, they recognized him as well. What's the word of blood on it? Someone couldn't wait to ask. Yu Qisong laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes. Jiang Yuqing, you should know what the word of blood on it says, right? Jiang Yuqing's temples throbbed. I don't, Jiang. Jian Shai suddenly raised the phoenix tail zither and shouted sternly. The word of Tung is on it. Jiang Yuqing, isn't this your Jiang? Digression, Tianling scepter. I heard that someone said that I'm a clown? February, yes. They're all talking about you. Tianling scepter, angry. February, yes. So I won't add more chapters for them. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 880. His voice was like thunder as it fell heavily. In an instant, everyone was shocked on the spot. The bloody words hidden on the phoenix tail guqin were actually Jiang? Anyone with a brain could guess that the Empress concubine had used such a complicated method to leave this secret signal on the phoenix tail guqin. There was definitely a hidden meaning. Dragon trapping array bloody words Jiang, isn't this implying that Jiang Yuqing is the one who harmed me? There was dead silence in front of Lang Kuan Hall. Jiang Yuqing's ears were ringing. Jian Shai's stern questioning was like a heavy punch, catching him off guard and completely stupefied on the spot. He thought that everything back then was flawless and that no one would be able to find any clues. But he never expected that Shangguan Yu had actually left a trick up her sleeve. There was actually such a shocking secret hidden on the phoenix tail guqin. Everyone's gazes converged on him. Suspicion, shock, anger, all kinds of gazes enveloped Jiang Yuqing like flames. Even his entire body felt like it was burning up. A sense of crisis that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. Jiang Yuqing had never been as embarrassed as he was now. He tried his best to calm himself down and tried to make his voice sound calm. The word Jiang doesn't mean anything. Not to mention the Tianling dynasty, there are countless people with the surname Jiang in Xiling City alone. Why are you so sure that it's me at first glance? What if this word doesn't refer to my surname, but something else? Jian Shai was so angry that he laughed. Jiang Yuqing, don't play dumb here. There are many people with the surname Jiang, but I'm afraid there aren't many who can be remembered by the Empress concubine, right? If she wasn't forced into a desperate situation, the Empress concubine definitely wouldn't have left such a hint. In other words, it's very likely that something happened to her in the zither room. And you, aren't you the one who usually accompanies her in the zither room? Do you really not know anything about this? Jiang Yuqing's eyes flickered. Mountain Lord Jian's words aren't without reason. But this matter indeed has nothing to do with me. Back then, the Empress concubine and I were in love, and we were about to get married. What reason do I have to harm her? You'll have to ask yourself. Wei Qisong suddenly interjected, his voice flat and indifferent. Didn't you also get together with the third princess in less than 2 years after the Empress concubine left? You even got married? Well said. As soon as Yu Qisong finished speaking, another powerful voice came from the other side. It was none other than Meng Jingji, who had been extremely dissatisfied with this marriage from the very beginning. Even if I don't ask you to be the Empress concubine and never marry again, you should at least show some sincerity, right? In the end, right after you finished the princess funeral, you were together with the third princess. You still have the face to say that you were in love? Heh, if this was the Western frontier, someone like you wouldn't be considered a man. Even women wouldn't take a fancy to you. Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan were together. Their relationship was fake, but their identity was real. If Sheng Guanwan didn't have such a status, why would Jiang Yuqing even spare her a glance? Although Meng Jingji was stationed at the Western frontier all year round and didn't return to the Western Tomb often, this didn't mean that he knew nothing about the Western Tomb. He was a military general, but he also had good eyesight. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit in this position for dozens of years. Back then, even Mu Qinghe couldn't replace him when she led troops to quell the rebellion in the Great Desolate Swamp. This person's ability could be seen at a glance. Jiang Yuqing's face instantly darkened. Sheng Guanwan was still shocked and worried about the phoenix tail zither, but in the next moment, she heard that she was also being scolded. She was so angry that her face turned white. But when she glanced at Meng Jingji, she forcefully swallowed back those unpleasant words. This person was a tough nut to crack. Today's troubles were already enough. If she provoked Meng Jingji, it would be like adding oil to the fire. Jiang Yuqing remained unmoved. He only said indifferently, "My marriage with one has nothing to do with this. Even if there's really something fishy about the princess's death, everyone shouldn't be able to pin the crime on me just based on the word blood, right?" He planned to insist on this point. It's true that the word Jiang was written on it, and it's also true that he was one of the closest people to the princess back then. Anyone who saw this would inevitably make the connection. But as long as they couldn't produce any other evidence, he still had some leeway. That's right. You have no evidence. My Jiang family won't let you off just because you're slandering Yuqing. We'll be at your mercy. Jiang Lizhua stood out and hollered in a low voice. This old man wants to see who it is that wants to drag my Jiang family down with him. How dare you pour this basin of dirty water on my son? Jiang Lizhua was a grand tutor after all, and his status was very high. In addition, Jiang Yuqing was now married to the third princess, so the entire Jiang family's status had risen by another level. Ordinary people really couldn't afford to offend the Jiang family. However, Yu Qisong suddenly laughed. Everyone will eventually find out who this basin of dirty water belongs to. Since you want evidence, I'll give it to you. Jiang Yuqing's brows twitched harshly. Seeing Yu Qisong's confident look, Does he really have any evidence? Yuchi Song stared at him and slowly said, I watched the princess grow up with me. I'm indebted to the princess's love for me, and she treats me as half a master. Ever since the princess's death, my Chongshu pavilion has also suffered continuous attacks. The pavilion's elders and disciples have all been beaten up, and there aren't many people left. It's almost impossible for the mountain gate to hold on. The reason for all of this is actually just that I want to investigate the princess's death. Yuchi Song's expression gradually turned solemn and cold, and even the surrounding space seemed to freeze along with it. It's not just my Chongshu pavilion. In the past 2 years, there have been many people who want to investigate the truth behind the princess's death. However, these people have either died or been injured, and some have even quietly disappeared, never to appear again. It's as if someone is deliberately obstructing them by hook or by crook. Everyone should be aware of this. In this world, the one who doesn't want the truth of that matter to be exposed the most is most likely the person who harmed the princess. A few people inwardly nodded. Although no one had said this on the surface, everyone knew in their hearts. Jiang Lizuo was so angry that he laughed. What, Yuchi Song, do you mean that the one who secretly killed your Chongshu pavilion is my son? Jiang Yuqing also frowned. Pavilion Master Yuchi, I've already personally sent Qi to you. It's true that he used Chaos Yuan gravel on the Chongshu pavilion, but I truly didn't know about this matter before. Whether it's true or not, let him come over and we'll know when we confront him. Yuchi Song said indifferently. Jiang Yuqing felt that this was extremely absurd and couldn't help but say, you know that Qi is already delirious, so how can you confront him? Oh, you're talking about this. Yuchi Song suddenly laughed. This old man has already cured him. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 881. Qi, you say it yourself. Yuchi Song ignored the shock on Jiang Yuqing and the others' faces and suddenly turned around to wave at someone. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He had been standing behind Yuchi Song and the others, so everyone subconsciously thought that he was a disciple of the Chongshu Pavilion and didn't pay him any attention. After hearing Yuchi Song's words, he walked forward and rubbed his lower jaw for a while before taking off a thin mask. Under the mask, the person's cheeks were thin and his face was haggard, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His left ear was gone, and there was only a scar the size of a bowl. It was a ghastly sight. It was Qi. Jiang Yuqing looked at Qi, who should have died in the Chongshu Pavilion, and his hands were already tightly clenched in his sleeves. He didn't die. He actually didn't die. Most importantly, the pair of muddy eyes had actually regained their clarity at this moment. Apart from looking a little weak, he was no different from an ordinary person. Qi raised his head to look at Jiang Yuqing, and his emotions suddenly became intense. His eyes were filled with anger and resentment. His entire body trembled, and he wanted nothing more than to immediately charge forward and chop Jiang Yuqing into 8 pieces. However, his chest was surging with anger, and he couldn't say a single word. He could only let out a hoarse whimper that was difficult to understand. His throat has been drugged and he can't speak anymore. Yuchi Song looked indifferently at Jiang Yuqing. I wonder what the person who drugged him was worried that he would say. Yuan Wei glanced at the situation, and his eyes moved slightly. Pavilion Master Yuchi, this Qi it's a long story. Then, Yuchi Song gave a simple account of finding the Mest Yuan gravel and finding the person who had secretly tried to kill them. Mest Yuan gravel can only be found in Nanjiang, and not many people in the entire Tianling dynasty have been to Nanjiang. Coincidentally, eldest young Master Jiang brought people there not long after the Empress concubine's death. This old man then asked him to help investigate. After a long time, he sent Qi over, saying that he was the one who did it. At that time, Qi had been tortured and beaten. He was unconscious and could not answer any questions. Even if this old man wanted to ask more, it would be impossible. Jiang Yuqing said coldly, Pavilion Master Wei Qi, are you doubting me? Qi De's body has traces of the mixed Yuan gravel's backlash. You clearly saw it that day. Why are you not going to admit it now? Wei Qisong, however, merely smiled. Qi Dai, raise your arm for everyone to see. Qi Dai did as he was told and rolled up his sleeves, revealing his forearms. On the inside of his forearm, there was a red line that extended from his palm upwards. Is this the evidence of the Mest Yuan Gravel's backlash? Jian Shai was shocked when he saw it. He immediately moved closer to take a closer look. There were very few people in the entire Tianling dynasty who could recognize this. Otherwise, Yu Qisong and the others would not have taken so long to figure out this matter. That's right. This is indeed the evidence of the Mest Yuan Gravel in his body, but the backlash. Jiang Yuqing heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Since Pavilion Master Wei Qi also said so, then where did this suspicion come from? Yu Qisong pointed at Qi Dai. Naturally, it's because the Mest Yuan Gravel in Qi Dai's body backfired much later than when we discovered the Mest Yuan Gravel. To be honest, the matter of the Mest Yuan Gravel was discovered on the day Lu Yu and Wanzhou officially entered my Chongshu Pavilion. Wanzhou grew up in Nanjiang, so it was him who recognized this thing. In the following 2 days, we thought of a way to clean up all the Mest Yuan Gravel on Qingyuan Mountain. Logically speaking, the person who did this should have suffered the backlash at that time. However, all the injuries on Qi Dai's body were added within this month. With every sentence Yu Qisong said, Jiang Yuqing's heart sank an inch. Apart from me, there are also many celestial physicians with superb strength present. If you don't believe me, you can come forward and check for yourself. Qi Dai's injuries clearly appeared after I went to ask Jiang Yuqing for help. As soon as Yu Qisong finished speaking, everyone quieted down and looked at Jiang Yuqing strangely. At this point, even a fool could tell that there was a problem. If Jiang Yuqing didn't do this because he had a guilty conscience, then why? Qi Dai, who caused the injuries on your body? Yu Qisong asked. Qi Dai pointed at Jiang Yuqing angrily and let out a hoarse cry of despair. Just take it that he did it for interrogation, so let's not talk about it for now. Then, who planted the Mest Yuan Gravel in your body? Qi Dai still pointed at Jiang Yuqing, his finger trembling slightly because of resentment and anger. Jiang Yuqing stared at him. Qi Dai, you and I are master and servant. I've never done anything to let you down. Why are you slandering me like this? Whether it's slander or not, everyone can see it clearly. I heard that you gathered all the subordinates who had gone to Nanjiang together and interrogated them one by one. After that, most of them went back. Only Qi Dai went missing. The next time he appeared, it was you who sent him to my Chongshu Pavilion. Wasn't it easy to do something during such a long time? Thinking about it, he should have been poisoned by the Mest Yuan Gravel at that time. Yu Qisong said slowly, but every word was like a heavy stone that smashed fiercely into Jiang Yuqing's heart. Do you have any explanation for all this? Everyone looked at Jiang Yuqing, waiting for his answer. In fact, even if he didn't say anything, everyone already had their own guesses in their hearts. What Yu Qisong said couldn't be faked. It was almost certainly true. Then, there was indeed something wrong with Jiang Yuqing. Faced with everyone's burning gazes, Jiang Yuqing took a deep breath and said coldly, Qi Dai followed me through life and death. Why should I treat him like this? At that time, Pavilion Master Yu Qi took the initiative to ask me for help. That's why I did this. In the end, you're saying that I lied to you? What good would that do for me? Fabricating a fake was naturally to cover up the real one. Yu Qisong's lips twitched without a smile. His gaze was sharp and cold, like a sharp sword that wanted to tear off Jiang Yuqing's hypocritical mask. If eldest young Master Jiang doesn't mind, can you show your arm for everyone to see? There's a question that this old man has been wanting to ask you for a long time. Your arm was injured not earlier or later, but on the day we cleaned up the Mest Yuan Gravel and caused the person who secretly poisoned you to suffer a backlash? Jiang Yuqing, can you answer these questions one by one? Asked Jiang Yuqing. A better reading experience came from Love Network. Chapter 882. Yu Qisong pressed on, his series of questions almost suffocating Jiang Yuqing. He originally thought that Qi would die soon after arriving at Chongshu Pavilion. Even if he didn't die, the people at Chongshu Pavilion would kill him out of hatred. Even if Yu Qisong and the others had doubts, they wouldn't be able to stir up any more waves. This matter would be closed. But he never expected that not only did Yu Qisong and the others fail to kill Qi, they even tried their best to save him. No matter how he thought about it, he actually left himself a huge problem. Jiang Yuqing was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have made such an unnecessary move. Even if Yu Qisong and the others kept suspecting him, they wouldn't be able to find any evidence. It would be a waste of effort. If he had thought more at that time, he wouldn't have fallen into such a trap. Now, the timing of Qi's backlash from the Chaos Yuan gravel didn't match up. Instead, it became the best evidence for them to refute him. Jiang Yuqing understood that if he couldn't give a reasonable explanation for this matter, then from now on he would have to bear this stigma. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, I really don't know what's going on. Qi used to be my subordinate, but after returning from Nanjiang, I dismissed them all. If it weren't for helping you this time, I wouldn't have gone to look for them at all. For such a long time, no one knows what they've been doing or who they've been following. Maybe they've already changed masters and are targeting me. Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth and only said that he had nothing to do with this matter. There's one thing that many people might still remember. Previously, I was ambushed in my residence and was injured. Because of this, I sent people to track down that person's whereabouts. And the person I was looking for at that time was actually Qi's good friend. To be honest, that person's name is Xiamu. He and Qi are good brothers who have gone through fire and water together. After being dismissed, the two of them didn't have any other relatives, so they became neighbors. They took care of each other and had a very good relationship. Since Xiamu was able to assassinate me, who knows if Qi did not have the same goal. Although Jiang Yuqing's explanation was somewhat weak, it was not completely unconvincing. After all, the news of him being assassinated in the Jiang mansion had spread like wildfire among the aristocratic families. To say that he was putting on a show was a bit too much. During this period of time, Qi has indeed been detained by me. However, in the beginning, I only detained him because I wanted to investigate Xiamu. Who would have thought that he would later discover that he had actually suffered a backlash from the Chaos Yuan gravel? I thought that he was the person Pavilion Master Wei Qi was looking for. After interrogating him, I sent him away. As for the rest, I really don't know. Jiang Yuqing cupped his hands at Yu Qisong. Speaking of which, I was negligent in this matter. I hope Pavilion Master Wei Qi won't blame me. But these things really have nothing to do with me. Back then, experts were as numerous as clouds in the Chongshu Pavilion. How could I have the ability to kill most of the cultivators in the Chongshu Pavilion in a single night? Pavilion Master Wei Qi, you think too highly of me. Hearing Jiang Yuqing's words, everyone's expressions were different. Many people's eyes were wavering. Chu Luiwei couldn't help but sneer as she listened from the side. Jiang Yuqing's mouth was as eloquent as always. He could make black sound white and wrong sound right. Just now, Yu Qisong had clearly laid out the evidence. It was almost irrefutable. He was actually able to rely on his glib tongue to earn a place for himself. She had really underestimated him. Eldest young Master Jiang. Chu Luiwei suddenly spoke. According to what you said, the Jiang character on the phoenix-tailed zither has nothing to do with you. This Chaos Yuan gravel also has nothing to do with you, right? Jiang Yuqing's expression was indifferent, as if he was very frank. Back then, I was about to marry the Empress concubine. Why would I do these things and painstakingly scheme to harm her? Everyone looked at each other. Actually, this was also the most strange thing about them. Jiang Yuqing's status back then was definitely higher than the Empress concubine's. This marriage only had benefits for him, no harm at all. But any normal person wouldn't personally ruin their own future and happiness, right? One had to know that back then, many young talents wanted this opportunity, but they didn't succeed. Because of his engagement with the Empress concubine, Jiang Yuqing had been envied by many of Shilin City's aristocratic families for a very long time. Back then, he really seemed to have been very attentive to the Empress concubine. There was really no reason for him to do this. No matter what he wanted, as long as he married the Empress concubine smoothly, wouldn't it be logical? Why did he have to go through so much trouble, killing the Empress concubine and eliminating the weeds by the roots? And in the end, it was just a big wedding with the third princess Shangguanwan. Compared to the Empress concubine, it was even worse. Chu Luiwen nodded thoughtfully, as if she was also moved by his words. That's true. I heard that the Empress concubine treated you well back then, and you also won the Empress concubine's favor with great difficulty. Originally, everything was fine, so you really had no reason to betray her, right? She spoke slowly as if she was stating a fact, but also as if she was faintly puzzled. For some reason, when Jiang Yuqing looked at Chu Luiwen like this, an inexplicable sense of apprehension and panic arose in his heart. Her words seemed to be hinting at something. Chu Luiwen suddenly smiled. On her beautiful face, there was undisguised curiosity and mockery. When Jiang Yuqing saw her smile, he was actually in a trance. Her clear, black jade-like eyes seemed to have a dark light flowing, like a sharp sword, piercing straight at him. Since eldest young Master Jiang has such deep feelings for the Empress concubine, then back then, why did you join forces with Xiahou Rong to forge a document to lure the tiger away from the mountain, tricking the 13th Yu out of shieling? Chu Luiwen said this sentence clearly and clearly. In an instant, almost everyone was stunned on the spot. The 13th Yu? Didn't they betray their master back then? For this reason, Jiang Yuqing even issued an order to kill them, which had not been revoked until today. What exactly did Chu Luiwen mean by forging a document to lure the tiger away from the mountain? Everyone's gaze fell on Jiang Yuqing. Even Xiahou Rong, who was originally standing in the crowd, instantly became the focus of everyone's attention. Xiahou Rong didn't expect Chu Luiwen to suddenly mention him and even directly reveal what happened back then. He was completely stunned and his face turned pale. He almost subconsciously retorted sternly. Chu Luiwen, what nonsense are you talking about? Chu Luiwen chuckled. I'm just telling the truth. You, how dare you? Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have the Chongshu Pavilion behind you. If you can't produce evidence today, don't blame me. Before he finished speaking, Chu Luiwen raised her hand and shook it gently. A secret letter appeared in front of everyone. This is the imperial edict that Lord Xiahou personally forged back then. Why don't Lord Xiahou take a look at it personally? The Love Network provided a better reading experience. Chapter 883. Xiahou Rong's voice stopped abruptly. He stared at the secret letter in Chu Luiwen's hands in shock. His face was as pale as a ghost, and he instinctively denied it. Impossible. I've been keeping that item in my study, and even Xiahou Tingan doesn't know where I put it. How did it end up in Chu Luiwen's hands? Officer Xiahou, what exactly is going on? Jiang Yuqing's face was terrifyingly cold as he questioned. Xiahou Rong actually let Chu Luiwen get such an important item. Isn't he courting death? Xiahou Rong glanced at him and felt guilty. I didn't. I'm loyal to Her Majesty. How can I do such a thing? You'll know once you see it. As Chu Luiwen spoke, he passed the letter to Yuan Wei. Officer Yuan, you're very familiar with Her Majesty's handwriting. Why don't you take a look at it personally and see if there's anything wrong with this letter? Yuan Wei's expression turned solemn as he received it with both hands. This secret letter had already been opened by someone, but the remaining golden ink on it was clearly specially used by the royal family. Even the size and paper of this envelope were strictly according to the corresponding standards. Looking at it dazedly, it really looked the same as the real thing. He opened the envelope and took out a letter inside. There were only a few lines of words on it, and the main idea was that there was a dangerous situation at the borders and that the 13 Yu guards were ordered to deal with it. Logically speaking, the 13 Yu guards were the princess's private guards and wouldn't listen to anyone else's orders. However, as the princess would usually deal with many things at the borders, and this letter kept hinting that this matter might threaten the princess, the 13 Yu guards were persuaded to go together. As the princess's wedding was around the corner, it wasn't convenient for her to leave, so the 13 Yu guards let her stay in Xiling while they went to the borders alone and planned to return after dealing with this matter. They then realized that something was amiss and rushed back to Xiling with all their might, but they were still too late. These people had set up layers upon layers of traps in order to distract all the reliable forces around her and finally make a move on her. Chu Luiwei tried his best to guard against it, but he didn't expect these two people to plot to kill her. How could he defend against that? This envelope, this letter, this ink, and the seal are all exclusive to His Majesty. But this handwriting is not His Majesty's. Yuan Wei frowned. Furthermore, this secret letter does seem to be from 2 years ago. The Yuan family had always been loyal to the Tianling dynasty. Since Yuan Wei said so, then it was an indisputable fact. If that was the case, then everything would make sense. Back then, someone had first forged such a letter and transferred the 13 Yu guards out of Xiling. Then, taking advantage of the fact that there was no one by the princess' side, they had secretly tried to kill her. Finally, he did not forget to eliminate all those who wanted to investigate the truth. This series of methods could be said to be flawless. If someone hadn't planned this beforehand, it would have been impossible to achieve this. This was clearly forcing the Empress concubine into a dead end. Yuan Wei had a grave expression as he looked at Chu Luiwei. "Miss Chu, may I ask if this letter was really found in the Xiahou residence?" Chu Luiwei said with a smile. Of course, in this world, there aren't many people who can forge such a genuine secret letter from His Majesty, right? Other than the handwriting, everything else is real. It was obvious that this was something that only a person who was deeply trusted by His Majesty could do. No matter how one thought about it, Xiahou Rong was one of the 3 grand tutors. He usually assisted His Majesty and had the most interactions with His Majesty. He was also the most convenient and easiest to do this. This time, even the surrounding officials' expressions changed as they looked at Xiahou Rong. Forging an imperial edict was a capital offense. If the situation was serious, it was very likely to implicate the 3 families. Was Xiahou Rong crazy? He actually dared to do such a thing. "Lord Xiahou, don't you plan to explain?" The gentle smile on Yuan Wei's face had disappeared and was replaced by a cold expression. The Yuan family had never participated in the struggle for power in the imperial court. But if it involved His Majesty, then this matter was much more serious. They had to investigate to the end. Xiahou Rong made up his mind and intended to deny it. "Chu Luiwei, you said that this was found in my Xiahou residence. Do you have evidence? Who knows if it was done by someone else? You're using it to frame me. I, Xiahou Rong, am loyal and devoted to His Majesty. I have never done anything to betray His Majesty." Chu Luiwei narrowed his eyes. "Since Lord Xiahou is so determined, do you dare to swear? If you really did something to betray His Majesty, then the entire Xiahou family will be completely destroyed." Xiahou Rong choked, but he still braced himself and said, I have a clear conscience. Why wouldn't I dare? If I really betrayed His Majesty, then let me die without a burial place." Chu Luiwei crossed his arms and touched his chin. "You haven't finished yet. Isn't there still the entire family?" Xiahou Rong's eyes twitched fiercely. "Chu Luiwei, don't go overboard." "I'm going overboard? I'm trying my best to prove your innocence." Chu Luiwei widened his eyes slightly. "Didn't you say yourself that your loyalty to His Majesty can be witnessed by heaven and earth? Why don't you dare to continue?" Xiahou Rong was in a dilemma. If he didn't say it, Chu Luiwei and the others would definitely not let it go, and he would appear to be very guilty. But if he said it, there's a God watching over us. "Lord Xiahou, if you are upright, what can't you say?" Chu Luiwei said lightly, but every word was like an extremely sharp knife, forcing Xiahou Rong to a dead end bit by bit. No one in the surroundings spoke, but every gaze seemed to have materialized and landed on his body, forming an invisible pressure that made it difficult for him to breathe. Jiang Yuqing said coldly, "Lord Xiahou, you have a clear conscience. Why can't you swear? If Xiahou Rong really tore a hole in him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth. I Xiahou Rong swear. If I really did something wrong to His Majesty, I'll let everyone in my Xiahou residence die a horrible death. Clap, clap, clap. In the dead silence, the sound of applause suddenly sounded from not far away. Clap after clap, extremely rhythmic. At the same time, a deep middle-aged man's voice followed. Lord Xiahou well said. Hearing this voice, Xiahou Rong's face changed dramatically. Even Jiang Yuqing, Shangguan Wan, and the others suddenly opened their eyes wide and looked back. They saw a person in a bright yellow dragon robe slowly walking out of Langkuan Hall. Perhaps because he was bedridden all year round, his figure was a lot thinner, but his frame was tall and his shoulders were straight. Standing there, he still had a noble aura around him. It was the current emperor of the Tianling dynasty, Shangguanyu. Digression. It's about 12:30 p.m., a little late. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the AI network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.